Welcome back to Brojo Online. Today we're going to talk about a specific belief system that many husbands have, and it goes something like this. Happy wife, happy life. Now I believe that this is some of the most terrible advice you could ever give a man, and yet it looks like wisdom. And this is why so many men around the world, in some way or another, follow this advice. One of my clients told me a story the other day where he first heard this thing. He was at a wedding and they were doing this kind of competition game thing where all the couples were dancing on the dance floor. And then I think after each song they'd stop and say, okay, if you've been together less than 5 years, leave the dance floor. One more song. If you've been together less than 10 years, leave the dance floor. And they kept doing this until there was like one couple left standing who'd been together for like 35 years. And they went up to them, what's the secret? And the guy says, happy wife, happy life. And everyone around him was, oh, that's good advice. And people were saying to the groom, you should listen to him. He knows what he's talking about. And everyone's got that same assumption that, hey, if you've been together for many, many years, then whatever you say about a relationship must be wise. I wholeheartedly disagree, and I've had to find out the very hard way how flawed that advice is. Or to be fair, how flawed the interpretation of the advice is. However, the way it's put doesn't leave much room for good interpretation. Now, sometimes people say this in other ways. I've seen it said like, make sure you always do what she says, she knows what she's talking about, or, never argue with her. It's all the same kind of advice, just put in different words. Let's stick with happy wife, happy life for now. I want you to just take a moment. Whoever you are, guy, girl, married, unmarried, whatever, take a moment and think, what does that phrase mean to you? If you had to describe that to someone who doesn't understand it, what would you tell them? I can tell you how it was translated by the nice guys that I work with and by myself when I was younger. There's a few points that we pull out of it. First off, let's look at the word happy. The idea that happiness is the only good emotion and that it's always the goal. And in relation to this phrase, the idea that happiness is what's healthy for the relationship. So if the wife is always experiencing the emotion of happiness, the relationship's likely to go well and it's likely to last a long time. So it's an idea that happiness is like a solution to the risk of rejection and abandonment, like happiness is a prevention. It also implies that any other emotion, sadness, confusion, bitterness, rage, all of these are bad for the relationship and should not be allowed to happen and should all be converted into happiness in some way. I think that's a pretty fair summary of how most people translate the happy in that phrase. So, of course, on the back of that, the idea is that if you increase happiness, you increase enjoyment in the relationship. That happiness can not only always be increased, that you can manually control it, as in the husband can control the wife's happiness, that he's responsible for it. It's not her job, it's his. That's heavily implied in the phrase. But also that it can be sustained, that someone can just be like permanently or nearly constantly happy. That's a realistic goal to have. This leads a lot of nice guys to assume that anything she wants, anything she finds pleasurable, anything that she thinks is a good idea, is a good idea. That there is no disagreement. If she wants something, give it to her. If she likes something, we do that. If she doesn't like something, we don't do it. If she doesn't want something, we don't have it. And so the nice guy husband will eventually just constantly agree with her and submit to all of her demands without any kind of filter, and often requiring him to go opposing to his own needs and his own wants. The idea, whatever she likes, that's best for the relationship, so we'll just go with that. So if we're doing everything she wants, at some point, this has to lead to self-sacrifice. There's no way two people have the exact same preferences at all times. It's not possible. Even the most connected best friend you've ever had wants some things differently to you. They have a different favorite song, a different favorite food. They prefer staying in when you go out, that kind of thing. Everybody's got slightly different preferences, and these change on a daily basis depending on mood and experience. So there's no way that you always want what your wife also wants. No way. Which means at the time when you go, okay, we're only going to do what she wants, then multiple times that that happens, you're going to be sacrificing what you want. And knowing the guys as I do, you're going to be doing so with silent suffering. You're going to pretend to agree, or at least sort of play neutral. You're not going to make it clear that you had a different preference. In fact, you'll actually numb yourself to your own preferences so that you actually feel like you agree all the time because you don't have any standards of your own or any needs or wants of your own. So the phrase is not happy husband, happy life. Nobody ever says that. It's always about the wife, isn't it? So this idea, if I sacrifice myself, that makes her happy. So in order for her to be happy, I have to suffer. And that's a formula that the nice guy comes to where he constantly looks for a way to suffer because he thinks that makes her happy. He actually starts to fixate on suffering itself. If he starts to enjoy something, if he thinks something is a good idea and he wants to do it, he immediately feels a sense of guilt, even if she hasn't complained, even if she actually agrees with it, until she's sure that she actually gets some sort of major value or pleasure out of it, he'll feel guilty for even wanting things because he feels like he must be suffering all the time for things to be going well. As the author Ryan Stone put it, he wants to be the sacrificial plow horse. He wants to feel that burden on his back all the time because that gives him a sense of security that he's being a good husband. It also means that the husband's well-being is dependent on the mood. This is the happy life part of the phrase. So if she's happy, I'm happy is the assumption. It's not actually how it plays out in practice, of course. But what it really means is if she's happy, it's a relief to me because it means my work is done for now, at least. My well-being, my sense of self, my confidence, my validation, my sense if I'm a good guy or not is measured by her happiness. So when she's happy, I get to tick all the boxes. I feel like I'm in the green. And when she's not, I'm a failure. I'm a bad husband. My life sucks. So it's this idea that like how I feel about myself and my life is chained to her mood. And she gets to control how I feel by just shifting her mood. There's an assumption that the wife will appreciate all this caretaking, that you constantly manipulating her into happiness so that you get relief is something that she'll be grateful for, that she'll enjoy. Looks like that on paper. You think, who wouldn't want to be happy all the time? Who wouldn't want to get everything they want? We don't think of, well, what happens to people who get everything they want? We have a word for that, spoiled. And then lastly, this assumption, happy wife, happy life, like long term, this idea longevity is a sign of success. That if people are together for a long time, things must be going well. I think this is one of the main reasons that nice guys feel like they've been hit by a truck when their wife hands them divorce papers after 10 years, because every year that goes by makes them feel more secure in the relationship. They don't actually measure the health of the relationship, they just measure longevity. They assume, hey, the longer she's with me, the more likely she is to stay with me. They don't understand the long-term poisonous buildup of resentment that's happening in the background, or they choose to ignore it. So a lot of guys are thinking like, hey, if I'm treating her well, self-sacrificing so that she always feels happy, never getting my own needs met, being that plow horse, and quite a few years have gone by with no complaints from her, I'm on track. It seems logical, but the divorce rate begs otherwise. I used to believe all this. I used to think that if you didn't have any arguments with your partner, that you're doing well. And that partner who says, oh my God, my boyfriend's the best. He never does anything wrong. He does everything right. I thought, well, that's a valid measurement. That guy's on track. And it's kind of logical in a sense to think that, especially when you've been raised with the happy wife, happy life idea, and you've been raised with emotional shame, and you think that most emotions are bad and only some are good. It seems like logical advice, and I followed it. And I couldn't understand why it wouldn't work for me. I'm like, I'm busting my ass here, breaking my back, bearing that burden so that she's always happy, and they keep leaving me. What's going on? Doesn't make any sense. When I lost my first long-term girlfriend, right at the point where I think everything was going well because I was living by this to the letter, it was such a cognitive dissonance. First, it made me think, well, I just need to be even nicer. I spent many years kind of like dialing it up even further, like as if doubling poison makes it healthy. It took me a while to realize, she left me because she felt bored, she felt disconnected from me. I think there was some infidelity, so in one way or another, she didn't respect me anymore. And this was not how the relationship had started. And it took me a long time to realize that following the strategy had caused the very end of the relationship that I was trying to prevent. Like all nice guy strategies, it had backfired on me. That happy wife, happy life ends in divorce. Since then, I've seen this happen literally hundreds of times with clients, even with friends, and they're left bewildered, wondering what went wrong, thinking they were doing everything right, quite often resentful at their partner for leaving, saying like, good luck trying to find someone as good as me. And I had to watch, cringing, going, yeah, she's going to find someone better, actually, because you're not as good as you think you are. And every time I relapse into this myself, my relationship gets worse. I think of nice guy syndrome as a kind of addiction that you're never completely free of, and you always have to be on your toes. And whenever my wife goes through a really hard time, emotionally or physically, if she suffers a lot, I have a tendency to relapse into caretaking. I don't fully believe the happy wife, happy life thing at all anymore, but some of the old behaviors come through, and whenever they do, our relationship gets worse, but it's a delayed reaction. So it looks good in the moment. I like ease her burden, I make her feel better, I take care of things that are annoying her, and then later on, we're disconnected, she's struggling to respect me, and it takes me a while to see, like, oh shit, it goes back to that. I'm doing it again. I believe this happy wife, happy life mindset is actually one of the leading causes of divorce, but it's not reported on. Quite often, what's reported as the number one kind of reason for divorce is that people feel that the partnership is uneven, that one person's pulling more weight than the other. And so if a nice guy's like busting his back, self-sacrificing to make her happy and she leaves him, his interpretation is going to be like, I was trying harder than she was. The idea that maybe he was doing everything wrong doesn't even occur to him. He actually resents her for not appreciating the fact that he was doing everything right. It's a kind of almost like an incel mentality. Because the hard truth for me was, as the years went by and I started to look more critically at myself, realizing, hey, if all these women are leaving me, I'm the fucking problem. And so if what I'm doing feels right and doesn't work, then it must actually be wrong. And I need to get humble, get curious, get detached, and see what the fuck's going on. And so I started observing relationships, the people around me, mostly my friends, family. And I started looking at the healthier ones, the ones that not only lasted, but it's clear that like the woman respected her man. She would defend him to others. She was enthusiastic about him even after many years. She wouldn't bitch about him behind his back or do things that made him look like, he wasn't wearing the pants in a relationship. Those kind of things where you're watching someone just cringing as, he takes a beating from his wife mentally or emotionally. I was looking at the people where that never happened. And the guy was vibrant and he was happy with his life, generally speaking, and he, was living some sort of mission. He was doing his thing. He made decisions, and his family seemed to support him rather than him like carrying them on his back. And I looked at this, and these guys did not behave the way I did at all. It didn't mean that they were unkind. They were very kind and compassionate, but in a different way. And they had all these qualities that I didn't bring to relationships, and they're doing all these things that I thought you're not supposed to do in relationships, that I would have called wrong, things that I was proud of not doing, despite the fact that my relationships weren't working. And so I started to look at them and go, okay, I need to look at them objectively. I need to put aside sense of right and wrong because it's obviously miswired in my head. It's not working. I need to ask, what are they doing that works? Generally speaking, it's very different to the happy wife, happy life strategy.